My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 91 years old, and at the wedding I paid $275,000 for, they wheeled me beside the trash bins. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above my head, and laughter echoed through the air like music from a life I no longer recognized. My lipstick was freshly applied, my hair curled with care, but the chair they gave me was tucked quietly into the back corner of the reception hall, flanked by two ornate garbage containers dressed up with silk drapery, as if no one would notice. I noticed. I smiled. Not because I was amused, or because I wanted to pretend everything was fine. I smiled because something inside me finally settled. After decades of sacrifice, of silent giving, of being the invisible thread that held everyone else's world together, I saw the truth. Not in anger. I've lived too long for wasted emotions like that. No, what I felt was clarity, the kind that only comes after a lifetime of being needed and suddenly realizing you're not even seen. The wedding was everything my great-granddaughter Ava had dreamed of. A designer gown, a full orchestra, imported orchids, vintage champagne served under a glass canopy. And every dollar of it came from me. My son Richard stood tall beside her during the toasts, raising his glass to family legacy and new beginnings, never once saying my name. His wife, Claudia, wore the diamond necklace I gifted her last Christmas, whispering to her friend, "She probably won't be around much longer." She didn't know I still hear everything. No one came to greet me after the ceremony. No thank you, no hug, not even a glance. When I tried to approach the bride to offer my congratulations, she turned, placed a perfectly manicured hand on my shoulder, and said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Bisabuela, maybe you should rest. We've prepared a plate for you in your room." In my room, as if I were a relic to be stored away after I'd served my purpose. I sat back in my chair, my spine straighter than it had been in years, and looked around the ballroom. The laughter, the champagne flutes, the diamond bracelets glinting under the light, all funded by the woman sitting next to the trash. I had spent decades building a family, lifting them, protecting them, providing not just for their needs, but for every wish they whispered. And in that moment, I made a decision. They would learn who they were without my money. If you've ever felt invisible to the ones you've given everything to, this story is for you. Hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me tell you what happened next. I was 36 when I buried the love of my life. Harold Whitmore died on a cold February morning in 1968, and by March, I was alone, with a toddler on my hip, a mortgage hanging over my head, and a world that didn't much care for widowed women with ambition. Back then, no one believed a woman could run a real estate business, let alone start one from scratch. But I did. I didn't have the luxury of breaking down. I had a baby to raise and bills that didn't pause for grief. I poured my heartbreak into work. While my son Richard napped, I cold-called property owners. While he played on the floor beside me, I studied zoning laws and renovation permits. I bought our first fixer-upper with every penny Harold and I had saved, renovated it with my own two hands, and sold it for double. Then I did it again and again. Brick by brick, loan by loan, I built Whitmore Properties during a time when women were expected to stay quiet, stay pretty, and stay married. I was none of those things, but I was determined. Over 5 decades, the company grew from a dusty home office to one of the most respected real estate firms on the East Coast. I didn't just build wealth, I built security, reputation, power, and I passed every bit of it on to the people I loved. I gave Richard everything he asked for. I paid his college tuition, bought his first condo, even let him consult at the company when he showed no real interest in running it. When he got married, I gifted them the brownstone they live in to this day. Claudia, his wife, was charming at first, but charm can curdle when it expects endless generosity. Over the years, she grew comfortable spending my money as if it were her birthright. Luxury handbags, private club memberships, international art investments, always under my name, always with a smile. Their daughter, Vanessa, had potential. At least I thought so. But she followed her mother's example, launching boutique businesses with zero market research and expecting me to bail her out when they inevitably failed. Organic bath bombs, subscription floral boxes, a dog spa in the Hamptons. I wrote the checks each time, thinking maybe this would be the project that helped her find herself. It never was. And then there's Ava, my great-granddaughter, a beautiful, bright, savvy young woman raised on wealth she didn't earn and praise she didn't question. Her life was curated for social media, the gowns, the travels, the gratitude posts she never meant. She once called me, joking during a live stream, the family bank. I watched from my penthouse as thousands of her followers laughed and sent heart emojis. I turned off the screen and sat quietly for a long time. 3 years ago, I began quietly crafting a plan, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. I named it Protocol Grace. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about reclaiming my money. It was about hope. A last-ditch hope that, if given the chance, my family might rediscover who they were without endless rescue. I consulted legal teams, financial advisors, and elder care specialists. We created airtight structures. I began slowly transferring assets, discreetly, in increments, to secure trusts that only I and my designated trustee could access. I gave Miguel, my assistant of 10 years, power of attorney for when the time came. No one noticed. Why would they? They never looked past my checkbook. I rewrote the company bylaws, restructuring Richard's executive role into one that held no voting power. I reduced Claudia's access to discretionary funds. I changed the deed on Vanessa's gifted home into a company-owned lease, renewable annually. Every wedding vendor, florists, musicians, caterers signed a 2-part contract, 50% up front, the rest conditional on my final approval. I even installed an elevator and medical suite at my main property, anticipating the possibility of living elsewhere. I never thought I'd need to use it. Even with all their entitlement, I still hoped they'd see me as more than a wallet. But that wedding proved otherwise. As I sat beside those decorative trash bins, watching Ava toast with champagne I paid for, in a dress I bought under lights funded by my lifetime of labor, I felt something click into place. Not fury, not sorrow, just resolve. They had shown me exactly who they were, and now I would show them who I had become. All I needed was the moment, and now I had it. The orchestra was mid-phrase, violins soaring in perfect harmony as I glanced at my watch. 10:41 p.m., the celebration was at its peak. Champagne cascaded like fountains, laughter spilled from every corner of the hall, and my great-granddaughter Ava posed beneath a flower arch taller than any guest. She held her glass high, her diamond-studded phone in the other, snapping selfies while the band played a classic jazz standard. Guests twirled under chandeliers I had chosen and paid for. I reached into my handbag and tapped out a single word to Miguel, now. From across the room, he caught my eye and gave the faintest nod before slipping outside with his phone. I remained seated, expression neutral, as the chain reaction began. Within 90 seconds, the orchestra stopped playing mid-note. Their conductor, having received the same message Miguel had, began calmly instructing the musicians to pack up their instruments. Conversations faltered. Someone laughed nervously, assuming it was a break. But when the waiters began clearing champagne flutes with quiet urgency, and the bar staff began locking the premium liquor cabinets, confusion rippled through the reception like a cold draft. I sipped the last of my wine as I watched Ava's brows furrow from across the dance floor. She walked briskly to the wedding planner, heels clicking, voice sharp but hushed. He looked flustered. His phone buzzed again. His face paled. The photographer lowered her camera. Then, almost theatrically, Richard, my son, pulled out his wallet and tried to smooth things over with a flourish. His card was declined. He tried another. Same result. Claudia, standing beside him in a gown I had gifted her last spring, whispered something heatedly and turned to call her accountant. Voicemail. No answers. No lifelines. As the guests began to notice something was wrong, Miguel wheeled me quietly toward the exit. No one stopped us. They were too busy trying to salvage what remained of their perfectly curated evening. We left behind the noise, the confusion, the subtle panic that was starting to take hold. Outside, the night air was cool and still. My car was waiting just as we planned. As Miguel helped me into the seat, he checked his tablet and said calmly, "Protocol Grace is active." I nodded. Then it's time I get some real rest. The next morning, my family woke to a different world. The shared accounts they had used freely for decades were locked, Claudia's art funds frozen, Richard's monthly transfer suspended, Vanessa's housing lease now demanding full market rent, Ava's honeymoon upgrade deposit denied. They called every lawyer they knew, every banker, every executive who had once answered to Richard. None of them could help. Over the past 3 years, I'd ensured every financial change was documented, verified, and shielded under legitimate restructuring. No court would reverse it. No loophole existed. On day 3, they each received a sealed envelope delivered by hand. Inside was not a threat, not a reprimand, but a proposal. Richards outlined a role at a nonprofit incubator, mentoring late-in-life entrepreneurs, something I knew would push him to listen rather than control. Claudia was invited to coordinate real fundraising efforts for women's shelters across the state. Her charm would now be tested for purpose, not profit. Vanessa was assigned a 3-month contract overseeing a new affordable housing initiative through one of the company's community outreach divisions. It would require early mornings, real effort, and no personal brand deals. And Ava, my sweet, spoiled Ava, was offered the clearest path: a full scholarship to complete her unfinished undergraduate degree, followed by an internship within the company's social responsibility division. If she accepted and completed both, the trust fund earmarked in her name would be restored gradually and with oversight. There were no threats, no deadlines, just opportunity. I didn't want groveling. I didn't need apologies. I didn't ask them to fall at my feet and beg for forgiveness. What I offered wasn't punishment. It was possibility. I'd taken away their safety net, yes, but not out of cruelty. I had done so with the belief that maybe, just maybe, they would discover something more important than comfort, who they are without me, and who they might still become. 6 months passed like the turning of pages in a book I thought I had already read, but this time the chapters were different. Not dramatic, not tear-stained or fiery, just quieter, slower, real. At first they resisted. Richard sent emails curtain-clipped. Claudia tried to host a fundraiser at a luxury boutique, half the proceeds going to her wardrobe. Vanessa complained to anyone who would listen about elder manipulation, and Ava disappeared from social media entirely. But then, the shift began. It was Ava who changed first. Not loudly, not all at once. It started with a letter. "Dear Bisabuela," it read in the neat, rounded handwriting of someone unused to writing by hand. "I enrolled in school. I'm starting with just 2 classes, but I actually like them. One of my professors says I ask good questions." She sent a photo of herself, hair tied back, no filters, sitting at a coffee shop table with a laptop open and a textbook highlighted. She looked tired and real. She looked like someone finding her footing without stilettos. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my main home. She arrived by bus, took a taxi from the depot to the house. No entourage, no makeup artist. Just Ava, in jeans and a wool sweater, holding a small wrapped package. Miguel opened the door. She greeted him like an old friend and waited for me on the porch, where I sat most mornings now, the Atlantic stretching wide before me. Her eyes shimmered when she saw me, but this time there were no crocodile tears, just emotion, earnest and unguarded. "Happy early birthday," she said, handing me the package. I opened it slowly. Inside was a journal, its cover soft and worn. I opened to find photographs, her first day back at school, her new ID badge from the company internship, a community garden she helped start in Brooklyn. One page held a scanned essay, graded A- with a professor's note. "Insightful analysis, keep going." At the back, she had written, "To the woman who gave me the hardest gift, myself." We sat in silence, broken only by the waves and the occasional gull overhead. Then she asked quietly, "Why didn't you just cut us off quietly? Why all this?" I looked at her, not as a child or an heir, but as someone finally seeing me. "Because you needed to see yourselves," I said, "not through my disappointment, but through your own actions." She nodded, the truth settling on her like sun after a storm. That visit unlocked something, a slow thaw. Richard, to his credit, eventually stopped fighting and started showing up. He kept his position at the Senior Entrepreneurship Program and over time began mentoring younger men who had lost their way. Claudia stopped trying to repurpose glamour into purpose and instead helped organize a series of small, meaningful fundraisers for women's shelters. Vanessa, who had mocked affordable housing, submitted architectural designs that were simple, sustainable, and actually functional. They weren't perfect, neither was I. But something had shifted. On my 92nd birthday, we gathered in the Manhattan penthouse I hadn't visited in a year, the same space where they once schemed about access and inheritance now echoed with real laughter. They brought food they had cooked themselves. No staff, no caterers, just family, imperfect, slowly healing, painfully growing. They seated me at the head of the table, not beside the trash, not out of obligation, because I belonged there. Thomas gave a toast, not rehearsed, not polished, just true. Claudia presented a photo book of real events she'd helped fund. Vanessa brought blueprints for a housing project that had broken ground last week. And Ava, dear Ava, brought a speech she'd written herself. To the woman who taught us that wealth isn't what you inherit, but what you discover when you have to build from nothing. Thank you, bisabuela, for letting us fall and for staying just long enough to help us learn how to get back up. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because the ache inside me, the silent sadness of being unseen, had finally lifted. Later, as I sat with Miguel on the balcony overlooking the city I helped build, he asked, was it worth it? The silence, the storm, the risk? I took a long breath and whispered, yes, they see me now, but more importantly, they see themselves. Sometimes love means giving less so they can become more. If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever felt invisible after giving everything, know this: your worth was never defined by their recognition, but by your resilience. Until next time, thank you for listening to Real Her Stories.